Hi, my name is Phil and I'm bringing this old canoe stern motorboat back to life. She's 32 foot long, 90 years old this year, and her name is Jabiru. We're up to episode 25 now, so welcome to this one. All the fiberglassing's done, but I still have a little bit left to do on the boat, so I'll explain what's going to happen in this episode. I've got all this overhanging glass which has to be cut off, so I'm going to cut that off with a diamond wheel in the grinder and then run a router along it and then round the edge with a sander. The reason for this is I don't want to cut my legs on the boat as I walk past it, because I've got a lot of work to do fairing. Once that glass is cut off and the shear line tidied up a little bit, I'm going to put more layers of glass between here and just past the edge of the garboard plank, which is about here. So there'll be maybe 250 millimeters there, and then it might come up, might even go across the bottom of the keel, make it a little bit more wear resistant. So that's what we'll see here. Got to give the whole thing a good wash down to get rid of the amine blush and prepare it for sanding so that I can put the fairing filler on. You might notice here that I'm running a vacuum cleaner all the time while I'm cutting this glass, and I've also taped up my wrist to stop glass getting on the skin of my arms. It's quite noxious stuff, and also I'll make sure that I wear a mask at all times while I'm playing with this glass. It's quite dangerous stuff to deal with. Roger very kindly helped me put this last piece of glass on along the length of the hull. I only had to put it on this one side because the overlaps on the other side were quite a lot bigger than they were on this side, so that's why I added this little bit of extra strength on this side just to make it stronger, particularly because the garboard had had a split and I'd had to spline quite a large wedge into that plank, so hopefully that'll hold it all together. What I'm doing here is I have a large Scotch-Brite hand pad, and I'm using hot soapy water to clean off the whole of the hull, everywhere that's been glassed. So to make sure that there's no amine blush and that we don't have any waxy substance that'll stop adherence of the filler on the surface of the hull. I'm now using this disc sander to knock all the bumps off and make sure that the overlaps are ground down a little bit before I put the filler on, just to try and make it easier to do. So the whole surface of the hull has to have this done to it, and parts of it I've done with the disc sander, then I've gone over it with the orbital sander, which is a very fine tool. You'll see here that I'm using a full face mask. This is pressurized by a little fan which pulls air through a very fine filter. So there's absolutely no chance that I'll be breathing in any of those glass fibres. So I feel very safe with that thing on. Even though it's cumbersome and a bit annoying to use, it's still worthwhile. You can see Roger in the background. He's rubbing down the sanded fiberglass with acetone to make sure that it's very clean, and I've started to put the filler on. This is a bit of a work in progress, how to do this. Haven't done it before, so sort of feeling my way as I go. So you'll see as the job gets bigger and bigger, or more and more of it gets done, that methods change a little bit, and I'll have a rundown later on with the tools that I'm using to put this filler on. Each time I mix some of this filler, I'm taking note of how much filler I use to how much resin, and this varies the consistency of it. The less resin you have and the more microspheres, the easier it is to sand, but at the same time you get more air bubbles in suspension. So it's hard to know exactly what is the right consistency, but and you will see that as I've do it more and more on the boat, the consistency will vary. So you'll end up with some parts of the filler you end up with a shiny surface, and other parts you end up with a quite dull or lack of sheen to the finished putty. So I think more filler is better. That's what I've come to realise at the end.
She's been here now for, I don't know, nearly 2.5 years, I think. 3 years, maybe. Yeah, hard to tell. I'd have to look at the dates. Anyway, after finishing the glassing, I've decided to put filler over the whole hull. And as you can see, I've done the other side and I'm up to here from the stern. I've got about maybe a third of the boat still to go on this side. And I'm putting the filler on straight away, all at once, so that it gives the filler resin about a week or so to cure completely. I found that if I start to try and sand it within a few days, the resin's still soft. It's winter here, so we're getting temperatures from about 13 to 18 degrees tops. A couple of days over 20 degrees, but not very many. That's Celsius. So hopefully the sander will take to it nicely once it's been cured properly. What I'm doing now is rather than wait for the resin to cure so that I can sand the edges to put more on, I'm using a spoke shave. So I'm just taking off that surface, which may contain amine blush or it may not. I'm not quite sure with the putty whether you get that blush feeling, but within a couple of days of putting this on, I can still feel, like up here, I put this on yesterday, that still gives a sticky feeling on my hands. So I reckon a week is probably enough to get it firm enough to sand without actually clogging up the paper. So I've gone around all of this with the spoke shave around the edges and done it. You might say it's a terrible thing to do to a spoke shave, but it doesn't seem to blunt the edge very much at all. It's I can go over it, and what I'm doing is going over any high spots like this, and just bringing them down roughly to the level of the surface around it, and that saves the sander a bit. It presents a much better surface to put the sander over. So anyway, I'll get on with puttying and see how we go. For the sake of explanation, I'm using this rather small scraper to spread the putty because it's easier on my wrists than trying to handle a big wide one. So what I'm doing is I'm putting on a fairly thick coat, and then I'll use another squeegee. I've got a couple of versions to use, which I'll show you in a minute. And I'm pulling it down with those other longer squeegees. I'll put a fair bit on here so that I've got a nice long pull down to the top sides. And then I'll probably do one from about there up towards the gunnel. So in the spreading or squeegeeing of this filler, I've got three options. This is a reasonably good spreader, but I tend to not use it very much. I tend to use a slightly wider one, which does a good job, and I can put weight on that, but it doesn't quite go from overlap to overlap. So it's just a little bit short. So I've made another one, which is a very old handsaw. This was old when I bought it when I was, I don't know, 15, when I first started work. It's a very heavy rip saw. I've cut the teeth off, and this edge is nice and straight. So that will go from overlap to overlap. So I can do a reasonable spread on that. So that's what I tend to use when I'm doing this. So I'm going to do this now, And I'm going from overlap to overlap. Always leaves holes in the middle, gaps that is, low points. So I usually fill them up with more filler. And then give it another go. Anyone who knows what they're doing in putting filler on like this will say he's not very competent, and you're probably right. In the days when I was actually building boats, there was no such thing as phenolic spheres and epoxy resin used in this manner. It's all a lot more sophisticated now. I remember the first time I heard about phenolic resin was a friend of mine was an industrial chemist. He worked for Union Carbide in about 1968 or 69 this would have been. And he said there's this fantastic resin that Union Carbide have now done for florists. And it was an aerated, probably with nitrogen or something, I'm not sure, but an aerated resin which would take up water. And it was used by florists because the flowers lasted something like a week longer in this aerated resin filled with water than it did if they were just left in water, you know, in a package as it used to be done. So that was phenolic resin. That was the only use that Union Carbide had for it at the time. So interesting times. So using them now to fill resin like this for filler is just fantastic. Even if I don't do it properly. There is such a lot of video that I have on sanding and filling the hull, as well as fairing it afterwards. So I've come to the point where I think I should stop this episode and finish it at this point where I've finished the filling. So next episode we'll look at fairing that filler and possibly getting a coat of epoxy sealer on the boat as well. So thanks for watching, and I look forward to seeing you next time.